Welcome to the MS-DOS project, where I talk about old games and where they came from. Today I'm continuing my Ultima retrospective with Ultima 3, Exodus. Soon after the publication of Ultima, Escape from Mount Drash, and the way that Sierra Online treated that game, the relationship between Richard Garriott and Sierra broke down very quickly. Richard had had many issues with Sierra even before then, including trying to force him to use an expensive disk formatting method for copy protection on disk, and Ken Williams, the founder of Sierra, being fairly dismissive of Ultima as a whole. The final nail in the coffin, according to Garriott, was that Sierra had stopped paying him the royalties they owed him, so he left another publisher, unsure what to do. He had a hit series on his hands, and now household name in Ultima, but he was wary to sign another publishing deal, considering all he had gone through with California Pacific and Sierra. As he did in most tough situations, he turned to his brother Robert for advice. Robert came back with a risky but enticing idea. They could start their own development house and self-publish. Richard thought it was a splendid idea, and they were able to sell the idea to his father Owen, who became one of the first investors in the company. And thus, Origin Systems Incorporated was founded on March 4th, 1983, in Austin, Texas, with an initial investment of $70,000. The name was borrowed from Origin's Game Fair, a tabletop role-playing convention. So, as many startups do, Origin started in a garage, this one being the garage of Richard's parents. Gary had only officially employed a few people. His brother Robert, Chuck Boucher, who was a major investor and was developing a game of his own titled Caverns of Callisto, and Jeff Hillhouse, who Garriott had convinced to follow him from Sierra, and had since moved into a cot in the garage. Additionally, Ken Arnold and Keith Balawi, who had created Mount Drash, helped with the project unofficially, as Origin couldn't afford to pay them. They all had to work quickly to get out a new product, partially because Richard agreed with his dad that if he didn't start to see success within a year, that he would go back to school. Amidst all of this, they ran an ad in Soft Talk, a popular computer magazine at the time, to announce their existence. And they didn't even have a logo. The magazine publishers had to create one for them. This ad attracted future team member David Shapiro, aka Dr. Cat, to come to Austin, seeking to work with the team. But as they already had two members that were working unofficially with the team, they couldn't afford to employ him either. That wouldn't deter him, however, as he would eventually come back and find employment at Origin Systems. While the development of Ultima 3 had to be fast, Richard and the team at Origin weren't looking to just mail in a quick cash grab. While the first two games had been solo adventures, this time Garriott took inspiration from the Wizardry series and allowed you to have parties of up to 4 characters. During development, Ken Arnold acquired a new piece of hardware, a Mockingbird sound card for the Apple II. With it, they were able to have a soundtrack for the game, something that few if any games had in 1983. Of course, there were several problems that had to be overcome, mostly because when Steve Wozniak had created the Apple II in the 1970s, he had not designed it with a hardware clock that would allow timer interrupt, basically a hugely important piece of CPU to allow multitasking. Luckily, the Mockingbird card had a timer that could be used to interrupt the CPU, but doing so would corrupt the disk operating system because the interrupt routine would write variables to the same addresses as the DOS. So the team had to effectively patch the DOS so that it would not corrupt, find extra RAM on a language card, and create a soundtrack. The result, however, was hugely influential, as it was one of the first games to have a situational soundtrack, something that would be common in the industry much later on. After several months of furious work and sacrifice by the whole team, Ultima 3 Exodus was released to the world August 23, 1983. The game sold over 120,000 copies and was received with high praise by players and critics alike. It received many ports to different systems over the years, including IBM PC, Commodore 64, Macintosh, and even the NES, which I'll probably talk about at some later date. So the question is, how does this game hold up today? Like Ultima 2, the game packed the box with goodies. The cloth map made a return, and it appears that all the continents, except for the lands of Lord British, have just disappeared from the face of Caesarea, marking the first of many huge cataclysms that this world will see. Additionally, there's not only a cool medieval-style manual of play, but 2 magical tomes, one for clerics and one for wizards. Mostly the books just tell you what the key commands are for the different spells, but the spell descriptions here are super awesome. Totally worth the read. I'll get back to the magic in a little while, but I just absolutely love the cover art. This demonic figure is super cool, but it also received huge backlash at the time, with many people labeling the game as, quote, demonic and corruptive to the nation's youth. So what is the premise of Exodus? Well, the manual should tell us. Welcome back, O illustrious adventurers. Long has been thy sojourn in the strange realm, though 'tis fitting respite for great heroes. Glorious are the names of those adventurers who slew the mighty wizard Mondane and his evil consort Minax. Wait, adventurers who beat Mondane and Minax. I was all alone for that. No one even bothered to help me out. Lord British only helped if I paid him, and he certainly wasn't going to get off his throne to come help me. Whatever. They now explain that there's basically a much bigger moongate called a Siege Perilous that 4 people can come through. Even though we later see 8 people jumping through regular moongates, but that's besides the point. And that is why you have a party now. Later in the manual it explains that after Minax fell, people examined some documents which hinted that Mondane and Minax had created something. It isn't really clear what it is, but something that came from the 2 greatest evils the world has ever seen cannot be good. So one day this huge island sprung from the sea where evil creatures started to pour out, and a giant serpent called the Great Earth Serpent had appeared to protect Castle Exodus. That will be important much later. The only clue you have is that an abandoned merchant ship was found with no traces of living creatures, only the word Exodus written in blood on the deck. This is definitely a much more coherent story than was presented to us in Ultima 2, so it makes much more sense right off the bat. It's still never super clear what Exodus actually is, but we'll get to that when we get to face him. So we arrive at character creation. This is honestly one of the coolest parts of the game. Stats have been reduced from 6 to 4, which is honestly really good here. But there are tons of more classes and more races to pick from. This time around, instead of providing an initial stat boost, races set limits on how high your stats can go, meaning that you want to match certain classes with certain races to get the best characters, which I didn't do the best job of here, but it's okay, part of the learning experience. There's like 20 classes here too, so you're going to need to experiment a lot to figure out what characters work best for you and what all the different classes actually do. The good thing is that you can keep up to 20 characters in your party, register, and swap them in and out of the party semi on the fly. You have to restart the game to do so. So once you create a party, you're dropped into the game, and that's it. No indication of what to do. Luckily, asking around can help you a lot here, more so than in Ultima 2, as in you actually get coherent clues for once. Also, you'll notice right away if you're playing the IBM PC version that there is no music. This is due to the fact that there were no real sound cards for PC until several years later. Luckily, there is a wonderful graphics and sound patch that adds the music back in. Take a listen. So you just kind of wandered around for a while, fighting monsters and exploring the various towns. The combat's pretty cool. There's a lot of strategy based off of where you position your characters, how you order them, and what weapons you use. Magic really shines here, because wizards get a 0-point spell that can mass kill orcs, and clerics get a similar spell that can wipe out undead foes. Eventually they can both get these overpowered mass death spells. Wizards get P, and clerics get Zikzikb. I don't know what it is, but it's cool and it makes dudes die en masse. Something I noticed about the game is that it is very hard. It's one of those games that makes you play it on its terms. If you try to go snatch all the important things out of the dungeons too early, you'll mostly have your whole party killed. You need to be slow and methodical, and that frustrated me at times. Luckily, I was patient enough with the difficulty to see it through, and it was definitely worth it. At some point, you'll see your characters have leveled up. What does that do? Well, it allows you to go to Lord British, and he will raise your max HP by 100 points for every level. Oh, you thought it would level up your stats? No. It's one of those early Ultima games. You have to pay to raise your stats. It's basically Capitalism, the simulator. Where do you pay to raise your stats? You have to find the lost continent of Ambrosia. Luckily, getting there isn't too difficult. You just have to sail your ship into the whirlpool that is randomly in different spots around the world. And that leads me to some of my gripes with the game. The first is the sailing system. You know how in Wind Waker you could only sail in directions the wind would push you, and you had to use the Wind Waker to change the wind direction every time? Well, imagine that, but you have no control over the wind. Like, sometimes I just want to sail to an island like 3 tiles away and it won't freaking move. Just super frustrating and unnecessary to have it work this way. It definitely didn't work like this before, and I don't remember it working like this in any of the games after. The lesson is, sometimes realism just isn't fun. Another thing is that once you get to Ambrosia, you find the shrines to level up and pay for your stat boosts. The problem is that now you have to level up 4 party members this time, paying 100 gold to bump up 1 stat, 1 point, and getting gold as a chore. So it's arguably worse than Ultima 2 in this regard, where at least your stat boosts up to 4 points for every 100 gold. Every time you kill an enemy, they drop a chest with a random amount of gold between 1 and 99 gold pieces. So to level up 1 stat all the way requires something like 7 or 8,000 gold depending on how low you start. Oh, and if you spend more than your character can actually level up that stat, you lose the money. That doesn't just give it back to you or say you can't do it. Good thing is, there's this town called Yu hidden in the forest that has no guards and is only populated by clerics. NPCs drop gold just like anybody else when defeated, so...
Approximately 10 hours later.
Being just a mindless killer does speed it up, but it's still just way too much. The grind for gold sucks. It's kinda obvious at this point it only existed to up playtime. I can't blame them, as they were trying to get out a product quickly, and it was 1983. But I am glad that gold grinding stopped becoming the norm in the series. In fact, gaining way too much gold becomes ridiculously easy in later games. Luckily, there are many things that are really good about this game. First off is a major improvement on how food is traded. While the need for food is still there, it's significantly reduced. Not only do your party members use food at a slower rate, but you also don't drop dead instantly, which is definitely a huge improvement. Instead, you just slowly take damage until you either get more food or die. Additionally, dungeons actually have a purpose now, and they contain special marks that if you touch them, you gain special abilities, like being able to walk on lava, pass through force fields, and increase how many times Lord British will level you up. Initially, he'll only level you up 5 times. These are all necessary to beat the game, so you'll have to crawl through the dungeons looking for them. You have many more tools now to help with dungeons, including gems that you can look at to see how each level is laid out, which is a lifesaver. My major gripe though is that in some spots in dungeons there are strange winds that blow out your torches, destroying them completely. The problem is it happens way too often in my experience, so you just end up completely blind a lot of the time. Luckily torches are pretty cheap at 6 gold pieces a pop, so it isn't that big a deal. One cool thing about the game is how many hidden things there are behind corners and all over the map. The engine now only shows things that are in your field of view, aka not blocked by trees, walls, or mountains, and they use it really cleverly to fill up a map that really is pretty small. This is a really good example of how to use your limitations to your advantage, and how to make a game feel much larger than it actually is. One of the biggest mysteries is finding where the magical city of Dawn is. I won't spoil it, but it is super satisfying when you finally are able to get there, and it pays off because there are really good weapons and armors there for purchase. Eventually, you hear about magical cards that are buried at the shrines. You go and dig them up, and only one person knows how to use them, the Time Lord. I don't know if there's some sort of relation, but he is a cool guy. He's sitting at the bottom of a dungeon that is only accessible via Moongate, so that requires you to figure out how to use the Moongates. This requires note-taking and experimentation, but basically the twin moons are shown at the top of the screen, with the first one dictating where the Moongate appears and the second one where the destination is. It's a really fun challenge to sort where they go and when they appear, and if you figure it out, you have an awesome new mode of transport at your disposal. So you use the Moongate, trek to the bottom of the dungeon, and talk to the Time Lord. He tells you the order the cards need to be used in. So are we gonna get in a Pokemon card battle with Exodus or something? Because that'd be really bonkers. We'll see shortly. So you've played for a long time, outfitted your party with exotic armor and weapons, and you're finally ready to see if it is possible to kill Lord British. Strictly speaking, he is impervious to normal damage, so you can't kill him. Trust me, I tried for a good long while. However, he is not impervious to damage from ship cannons, so what you have to do is head to his throne room, head through these left two doors, take this ship in the moat to the front of his castle. Now just attack some guards and defeat them, luring him to the front. If you do it right, you can board the ship before he can engage in combat and fire the cannons on him, killing him. Lord British said he didn't want him to be killable in the game, and he was upset when he found out somebody killed him. But there's no way that somebody didn't set this up on purpose. I don't think there's anywhere else where there's a ship just sitting in a moat. This wouldn't be the first British death egg to slip past Garriott, however. After you've doomed your own timeline, not really, he just respawns, it's time to face Exodus. You shout a magic word to pass the snake, and enter Castle Death. This is where your powerful magics will pay off, because these enemies are tough. A lot of them are hurling fireballs at you before you can even engage in combat, and then they're hurling them across the map, making it just really difficult to survive for very long. It doesn't help that every turn there's an explosion on a random tile in the castle. It does massive damage to your party if it hits. You'll want to make sure your party is pretty maxed out before heading there too, because these enemies will knock several hundred hit points off in no time flat. It would also be advisable to have a lot of party members capable of healing magic, that'll save your butt multiple times. After wandering a while in Castle Death, and likely having your whole party killed several times, hope you saved right before you entered, you find the final chamber. You approach and are attacked by the floor? Yeah, the floor attacks you, which is actually a pretty clever way to make invisible enemies, even if this isn't super sinister. This would make it a super tough fight, or you could just cheese it with the mass death spells and attacking right in front of you because the AI isn't that bright. It is a game from 1983 after all. So you slice through the floor and find a old computer terminal? And turns out this whole time Exodus was really just an old IBM mainframe, and you don't need to battle him in Pokemon. You just feed it punch cards to cause it to self-destruct.
Easy, there are only two controls. A forward-reverse switch and a self-destruct button. You know, a lot of guys don't take the time to include a self-destruct button anymore.
So you insert the cards in order, and that's it. You defeated Exodus. Honestly, super anticlimactic, considering the box has the huge demon on the cover. The game tells you to report your feat to Origin, and if you did so back when they were still around, you'd get a certificate signed by Richard Garriott. So, after way too much dissection, discussion, and rambling, is the game worth playing today? I think it's a pretty firm yes. Are there things that make it hard to go back to? Sure, the gold grind being the most notable of them, but the bright spots far outshine the dark ones. The one thing I would say is that replaying it may have the same flaw that Breath of the Wild does. A lot of the fun is in discovery and mystery and just figuring stuff out for yourself. And once you figure them out, it may lose a lot of the charm and awe. I mean, once you get a ship, you can pretty much just go dig up the best armor and weapons, and they're unlimited, so you lose a lot of the challenge. But of course, you can still have fun with killing Lord British, making bridges out of ships you collect, and that sort of stuff. It really is a great CRPG, and was and is deserving of praise. As a piece of history alone, it's worth a look, but I think the game itself is great regardless. This is definitely where the series started to become truly spectacular, and I think it's definitely worth playing today. I'd like to just give a quick shout out to everybody that gave input to this video today. My biggest source for a lot of the information that I discovered while I was getting ready for this video is the book Through the Moongate, which really dives into the history of the Ultima games and their development. The authors did a pretty good job here, just digging into stories that I hadn't heard of. I'll link where you can find that in the description. I'm also really grateful to all my viewers and commenters who have responded positively and helped me to improve my videos. It helps a lot to hear outside voices, especially since I'm just trying to bang these videos out sometimes. Thanks so much for all the continued support, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.